Hello, my name's Ian Seeger from Pilot Career News. On the 6th and 7th of November, we held our very first virtual edition of Pilot Careers Live. We streamed over 30 different seminars with 60 speakers. There were 2 days packed full of great information. Of course, we recorded everything, and you're about to watch one of the videos from the event. Before you do, I just want to thank our sponsors, Bose, Alsim, Entro, and of course Pulis. Without them and without the exhibitors, it wouldn't be possible. The exhibitor pages are still live, so feel free to head on over there. Go to www.pilotcareerslive.com and click through to the exhibitors. There's loads of information, loads of downloads, all sorts of great stuff there for you. Anyway, enjoy the video, and if you find it useful, really appreciate it if you click subscribe on our YouTube channel. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Hello and welcome back. Sorry about that. There was a minor technical teething problem, so I'm going to go straight to the panel and not waste any more time. William, can you talk us through the top tips for people considering training in COVID times?
Like I said, or tried to say earlier, that when I finished my training in 2016, everyone was landing jobs directly due to that foreseen pilot shortage. And now, of course, people just have to change their mindset. If you want to start your training, just be aware that you might have to wait a year or 2 years, which is not a problem. It's still a 40 to 45 year career ahead of you. So it's all about that mindset of going from landing jobs directly after graduation, being pulled directly into the airline, towards waiting maybe 6 months, 1 year for that first airline interview. I think that's the most important part that all the cadets, the future cadets, need to be aware of. That they just have to have that positive mindset for the future.
Okay, thank you. So we might come back to training times a little bit later. Petter, we went to you and we spoke about 9/11, so perhaps we can start that one again.
Yeah, so as opposed to William, when I started my airline career, that was back in 2002, which was just about 9 months after September 11 had happened. Which was another major blow to the industry, obviously. And I managed to land that job. A lot of people didn't. So it was a similar situation to what we're in now, not as severe, though. But one thing that I want to kind of let people think about when it comes to this is that the airline industry is always constantly changing, right? There's always, the only thing that you can be absolutely sure about in this industry is that it will not look the same in a few years as it does now. And what happened in 2002, or in 2001 when September 11 happened, was that before that, you tended to get jobs in one way. You tended to have to go through working for smaller operators, maybe flying some turboprops and jumping up into to jet after a few years if you were lucky, and then maybe going into flag carriers later down the line. What happened in that change was that the major low-fare airlines popped up, and all of a sudden there was completely new possibilities to jump into the industry. What I think will happen is that after this, once COVID kind of calms down, we will face another airline industry. It will look different. It doesn't mean that the airline industry will disappear. It might mean that the jobs will be somewhere else in a different, it might be that low-fare airlines becomes even bigger, for example, or something else happens. So this, even though we don't know exactly how it's going to look right now, what we've learned from history is that the airline industry does bounce back, and it just looks different when it comes back.
Absolutely. We've got a great piece tomorrow from John Strickland, who's looking at the future shape of the airline industry from a kind of fleet point of view. Andy, how about you?
I agree with what's been said. You know, if you want to get into this industry, follow your dreams. Things are different today than they've been in the past. But as Petter said, the industry will recover. It'll look different. It has done in the past, but it has every time recovered from whatever's been thrown at it. We're getting closer to solutions. Mass testing in Liverpool in the UK has started today. So soon we're hoping there'll be a vaccine and we'll start to get it out there. And one thing you hear everywhere you go is the amount of people saying, I just want to go on holiday. I want to go and get some sun and get out from the UK from the rain and enjoy ourselves. So there's a great demand for it there. Will it be in the next 6 months? No, probably not, but keep going. And I think one of the really important things for people is don't just concentrate on your flying skills, but all of the pilot competencies, all of the soft skills that are there are really, really important, just like Petter, to make you different than the rest of the candidates when you've got that all-important interview. so you are there ready to step into your airline.
I'm going to move to Alex now, studio guest. Alex, do you have a view on this?
On the effect of COVID on the training plan, I think I agree with all the previous speakers, and I also think that the industry is very unlikely to recover for at least 3 to 5 years. So some of the questions that have been coming in on chat that have been asking about when the industry is likely to recover, I think not now is the answer to that. And you should probably plan your training accordingly. So that would mean probably coming away from integrated type training, which is a comparatively expensive and rapid training path, and starting to look at modular training. And all of my colleagues here on the panel who run integrated schools have discovered the magic of modular training and are now offering modular courses. And certainly if you have a day job, I would keep in the day job rather than give it up. For people who are actually in training now and had plans to graduate in the next 6 months or next year or so and look for an airline job, I think now's the time to start slowing down and thinking about how you're going to structure your training so that you can, when the market does pick up again, you can do it most effectively. And that would perhaps be to get your license frozen, as it were. So if you've done your ATPL theory, then there's a timeline from that point. You've got 3 years to get your CPL and your instrument rating issued. So that gives us 3 years from now, and you could plan your training quite steadily over that period. And if you are at CPL stage now, perhaps start thinking about the most cost-effective way of freezing your license, which might be not to go for the classic multi-crew IR, CPL IR, but perhaps go for a CPL and a single-engine IR, which is considerably cheaper, and then you can just stop at that point, and you can use your single-engine IR to keep your current until the market picks up again. And it has the advantage, that plan, of when the market does pick up, then you can go and do your multi-engine piston rating, you can do your instrument rating, you can do your APS MCC, so you'll be relatively current for a reborn market. What you probably wouldn't want to do is to get yourself right the way up to license standard and then lose currency.
So just for anyone listening who's wondering what some of those terms are, if you look through the seminar schedule, we've got some things on ground school, we've got some stuff on APS MCC, we've got some stuff on how you keep yourself current and how you keep yourself sharp once you finish training throughout the next 2 days. So take a good look, there's some good stuff there. Oscar, what's your thinking on this?
Okay, well, if anyone asked me just a few months ago, say in February, I would say that this was the best time to start my training, and the industry was booming, to actually predicting what's going to happen next year or in the years in the future is very, very, very difficult. It's proven that starting in January wasn't a good decision, retrospectively. So I would say this is as good as it gets. Next year, we know actually it's going to be difficult for the people who are in training. That's easy to see. The industry is collapsed actually, and but people who are really thinking to become a pilot, I think it's a long-term decision. It's not a short-term decision. It's a career which is very long. It's going to be the next 40 years of your life possibly, and the reality is that. If you start your training in January, February next year, you're going to be coming out from your training. The sooner it's going to be possibly by the middle of 2022. Who knows where we're going to be in 2022? What I can tell you is that I'm dreaming with flying again, and with spending my holidays somewhere, not in the sun because we are in the sun here in Spain, but maybe in the north. So I think. Nobody can say, nobody has a magic ball. Someone mentioned before about modular training. Is it time for modular training? Well, I don't agree, really. I think integrated training hasn't lost strength. Actually, I understand people can select modular training when you are working and you have to save some money to pay for your training. But right now, it's not just the flying industry. All industries are suffering, and it's not as easy to get a job today as it was 9 months ago. So if you can afford it, if you got the money, it's a very good time to actually just get your training done and to be ready for when the industry picks up. To be current, well, we make sure students will remain current. That's our commitment. Our commitment is that until our students don't get a job, our work hasn't finished. We have to be active. We have to make sure they keep current and they're well prepared for when the industry picks up.
Okay, thank you very much. Eugene, can you have your input on that?
Of course. It's hard to predict where the market's going to be and when it's going to recover. But I share Andy's optimism and Oscar's optimism on this, that it will bounce back, and it'll bounce back strong. And the point on for our aspiring pilots out there now who are thinking of following this route, there's a amount of time it takes them to run through their decision-making application process, and even with a modular, even with an integrated program. They're looking at a couple of years from now before they are there with the ink wet on their license. That's looking into 2023 before at that point. I think we'll be in a completely different position. The market will be in a completely different position by 2023. And Peter gave us some good insight into his thoughts on how it might adapt and change. But for sure it's going to come back. It's going to come back strong. And I think there's real opportunity now actually for those who are thinking of setting out into training to look beyond the gloom of what we have now and look to the positivity of what's going to be there further down the line. And I think there's you should be optimistic about that. Think in the long term, and if you've got a dream to go and be a pilot, those of us who have spent years doing that, it always puts a smile on your face, and that's what you do it for. So go after that dream and be positive about the future that's there, because I think. Although it's gloomy at the moment, there's optimism for that future timeline.
I think I remember we did an event post 9/11, and that was probably the quietest Pilot Careers Live that we've actually done. And the interest was, everybody was kind of confused at the time. But the industry did then rebound, and it rebounded fairly quickly. Now I think we're in a different situation now. It's a global situation, and the effect is much worse. But there are countries showing some growth at the moment. And when I was chatting to David Morgan from EasyJet, we were talking that if in the UK we could bring in airport testing and stuff like that, we could really help the aviation industry out. And certainly the latest lockdown in the UK has not done anyone any favours in aviation. Alex everyone will know that there are 14 ATPL ground school subjects, and I think anyone who's interested is really living through the 15th ATPL ground school subject, which is if you've got this career for the next 40 years, you're going to see something like this maybe 2 or 3 more times. So you need to plan for that as well. William, how long, if you could time your training and start again, because it's not really about when you start, it's about maybe when you finish. Do you have any views on the industry and when it might recover?
To pick up where Alex and Oscar also left, if I could restart my training today, I think there would be no rush. I think the flight school landscape changes a bit. More to modular, because if there's no rush, I remember in 2015 I was really rushing myself through integrated training to end, because I knew there were so many jobs waiting. But nowadays I think indeed we can actually gear back and slow things down. Maybe work combining with studying, go to modular training. Actually depends on the different profiles, but like Alex says, I think the rush to become a pilot, you can indeed now stretch the training more, to have, let's say, also less debts at parents or at banks, etc. So I think indeed, if you can stretch now your training to 2, 3, maybe even more years, I think it would depend on the different profiles, of course. But that's what I would definitely advise to those who are still doubting to become a pilot.
Thank you. And Andy, what's your view? You talking about core competencies earlier? Or was that Peter? I can't remember.
I think it's absolutely vital to land that job when the industry starts to recover. I do take a more positive view on it. Just looking at the Boeing data that came out a week or so ago, they are looking at mid 2022 back as recovering and getting back up to some substantial numbers. And history's shown us every 15 years passenger travel it doubles. So, you know, history has shown us we can recover from this, and we will recover from this. And I think actually someone that's well known to the panel, Andy O'Shea, and I think he's actually been interviewed with you, Ian, who said the best time to be in training is when there are little or few jobs out there, so that when the jobs come back, you are fully trained and ready to go. So someone starting training in the next, you know, January, February, or even through for 6 months will be absolutely spot on to hit the floor running in 18 months to 2 years' time, when the industry is fully back up and recovered.
Yeah, I think the pilot and air traffic controller tap is not something that you can just turn on quickly and produce lots of pilots when you need them. Petter, anything to add so far?
Oh, absolutely. So, I mean, I tend to, because I get these, I've been talking to people who want to become pilots for years now through my work with Mentour Pilot and YouTube channel. And what I've always been saying, especially during the upturn that we saw from 2016 to 2019, is that in this job, you have to prepare for potential downturns, because they come suddenly, and you need to prepare for that just like you prepare for a flight, which is that you have alternates, that you have ways to deal with something if something unexpected would happen. And why I'm saying that is because we're now talking about integrated versus modular and things like that. I would look at it from what is your actual financial status right now? How can you take 6 months of unemployment or a year of unemployment? You should count on that first. Whether or not you choose to go down the integrated or the modular route is going to be, in some cases, a continuation of that discussion, but it doesn't have to be. In fact, what we've seen previously has been that when times that the industry is doing really, really well, then it doesn't matter much if you've done integrated or modular, if you've been swapping different schools and stuff during your training. While when the industry is in a downturn, it tends to be the strongest schools, the strongest training, that those are the pilots that gets the jobs once the industry starts picking up again. So that's something that you need to think about. And in relation to what Andy was saying, your competencies, that is what's going to decide it. How well you've spent your training, how much you have made sure that you have the competences needed by the time that you get that precious first interview, because that interview will come. There's no question in my mind about that. Like I was saying before, the industry will come back, whether or not it's low-fare airlines that's going to boom, or whether or not it is partially now state-funded flag carriers that will bounce back and start needing pilots. People will want to fly. People will want to travel again. And when they do, when all of these people who said that they want to go on a vacation want to do so, someone is going to fly them. And there is a lot of pilots now leaving the workforce as well. A lot of the baby boomers that was scheduled to go within the next couple of years, they're now going prematurely because they don't want to go through one of these downturns, going into a new course for a new airline just to work a year or two. So they are leaving the workforce. Together with the fact that if this boom comes and only a fraction of all of the aircraft orders that are still outstanding with Boeing and Airbus comes through, there will be a need for a lot of pilots. And that will be maybe it could be in 2 years, it could be in 4 years. But the important point here is that you was out there right now, and you're looking into what kind of training you want to do, because you have the bug, you want to become a pilot. That's what you want to do. I know how that feels. You now need to sit down and look at, okay, what kind of financial situation am I in? Can I do this training integrated and then be unemployed for a year? If that's not the case, okay, how do I deal with that? Do I delay going into the training, or do I go through a modular course? But the point is that you need to be aware that that's a possibility, and you need to plan for that. You cannot plan for having an employment immediately after your course is finished, just like William was saying.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Oscar, you mentioned earlier that your job as a school was not finished until someone had a job. Could you expand on that? Can you expand on how you stay in touch with your students and how you help them after that?
Yeah, absolutely. For the moment, at the moment, for example, we are giving PBN to all of the guys actually who have graduated over the last 12 months. Something that they didn't have in the license, but it's compulsory now to get an instrument rating. So there are things we can do. UPRT, actually placing them in the same to get them ready for that interview when the time comes. IR renewals for a price which is almost for free. You know, there are many things we can do to help people current. But yeah, I entirely agree with Peter. You know, don't bank with having a job just when you finish your training. If you don't have the money to survive, just wait. You know, but I think this is not only valid for today; it's valid for a year ago. Things can change, and you have to have a plan B. So I entirely agree. What is clear to me it is that the market, when it picks up, is going to be more competitive. The airlines have stopped all the programs for a year, and they were very selective in deciding who joined the programs. When they come back recruiting, they're going to be looking for the right candidates. They're going to go for the best. So it is very important that actually you prepare yourself and you get a solid background. So that's going to be, I would say, again, same as Peter, more important than before.
Alex, if I can come to you in the studio, you made a good plea for the modular supported. What can people do in order, if they're taking a modular course, to give themselves the best chance of finding a job later?
Well, we have data on this. We have Andy O'Shea from Ryanair, who used to be the chief training pilot of Ryanair. And he had, before he retired, he consistently said for years and years and years, every time he stood up, he said there is no difference in quality between integrated pilots and modular pilots. So from the point of view of modular pilots, how do you prepare yourself? Well, several people have mentioned the ICAO competencies, and this is part of the new syllabus actually in ground school, is you get taught about the ICAO competencies, and in a very light way you get assessed. And that reflects the sort of interview process that you would get with an airline like Ryanair. They're not just interested in can you fly an approach. They're interested in your capacity as you do it. They're interested in how you communicate. They're interested in how you interact with other people. And that's something that is often missed in the early stages, because PPL training is just about flying. Can you fly? Can you navigate? And it doesn't consider how you get on with people. The reality is that the most rounded and capable cadets will get the job, and actually being able to fly an approach is just a very small part of passing the interview. Listening to some of the other candidates, I think there is an element of cognitive dissonance going on here, and there are a couple of things that are getting confused. I would agree the industry is going to bounce back. Yes, it is going to come back. I don't know how it'll come back. It might be next summer in 2021, it might be the year after that in 2022, it might be a combination of the two. But an industry coming back is not the same as a recruitment boom, because there are tens of thousands of unemployed pilots out there that will go first into the jobs. Yes, some of the older ones are retiring, but it's not. We're not talking about significant numbers here when you talk about the total potential demand. So I would go back to what I said right at the beginning. I think there's going to be no significant recruiting for 3 to 5 years, and you should manage your training accordingly and manage your life accordingly. Petter is absolutely right, as is Oscar. You have to make sure that you have an income. You cannot, at this stage, it's not a good plan to give up everything, become unemployed, and do a very rapid pilot training course. Stick in the day job, work at what you're certainly good at, and pursue your vocation in a steady way, assuming that nothing is going to immediately change.
I think, interestingly, the Boeing numbers for Europe, I think over the next 20 years, they dropped from 148,000 pilot requirement to 147,000. So it's just 1,000 drop over 20 years, which was kind of surprised me, I have to say. Eugene, if someone approaches you and says, integrated modular, what do I need to take into consideration? What would you suggest? What's your answer?
Well, we've got a whole discussion. Perhaps we can have on that later on as well. Maybe we'll go into more detail. But there are pros and cons both ways, and you need to look at what it is that you want out of your training. There's benefits to modular, and that you can pace it and spread it out over a longer period of time, as Alex alluded to. But there are key benefits to integrated as well, where you get good continuity of training, good continuity throughout that, and I do think that there are some strong benefits that airlines recognise from a modular training course. The other benefit is that quite often you'll find with ATOs who deliver a integrated course, will have their placement pool opportunities, good relationships with airlines, and as Peter alluded to earlier on, that's the key thing at the end of this is finding yourself a job. I'd also like to just sort of pick up on be more optimistic again about the outlook. As we went into this COVID crisis at the beginning of the year, there was a predicted shortfall of pilots, a significant shortfall of pilots in the industry. And there's some good points made on the fact that it's going to take time to recover. Some of the data would suggest that the domestic market will be picking up by 22 and international by 2023. So the timeline we were talking about for training pilots coming out with a fresh license in 2022, 2023, we're going to be back, the market will be recovered. That shortfall of pilots will start to re-emerge shortly after that, I suspect. And I'm just sort of repeating my positivity on this. I think the outlook is not all doom and gloom, but clearly we've got some difficult ground to navigate over in the meantime. And those who are in training right now and coming out of training right now, for sure, there's some hard times to come before the market picks up. But I'm more optimistic about the future.
Okay, well, we've extended this panel because obviously we had a film in the middle, so we've got, roughly speaking, just over a minute per presenter. So I'd like you to ask, just to sum up in 1 minute, what are the key points that you would like to leave people with before we move on? So, William, can I ask you?
Well, of course, yeah, well, sure. Well, also to come back to what Peter said, I think it was really nicely said that if the aviation market will pick up again, that airlines will look for reputable schools with high standards. So my advice would be, before I leave you all, is that don't go for the cheapest modular shopping throughout Europe where you have a pilot's license at the end of the road, but choose a school where you really have standards, an approved syllabus with high APS MCC standards, with school with airline connections, as Peter said as well. From the moment the airline industry will pick up again, they will turn to the bigger schools for airline recruitment. So don't, let's say, seduce yourself to go for that cheaper option by going for modular shopping throughout Europe, which is quite, it's what some people do. So I would definitely say, go inform yourself and find that school that really gives you a nice aftercare feeling as well from the moment the airline industry will pick up again.
Okay, thank you. Andy, your minute of wisdom?
All about the quality of the provider, your training provider, whether you choose a modular route or an integrated route. If you get the right training provider that has the links to airlines, that looks at all of those pilot competencies, and gives you everything you need, whether that's a CV workshop, help to do your interview practice, and then, as Oscar's been saying, work afterwards, whether it's IR renewals if you need them, an extra sim trip prior to you going to your interview. Those are the important things. It's the whole package. So it's not just a cheap and cheerful. When you add it all together, then there's a number of schools out there which can give you that, prepare you for that all-important interview.
Alex, I'm going to switch to you in the studio if I may. There's been a bit of talk about the modular route and not shopping around for the cheapest, for example. And you could clearly buy the cheapest one of every module and do every module at a different school. I don't know whether that would have a material effect on your employability or not. And presumably a good APS MCC course. And there's a good session coming up on APS MCC and what it is if you're not sure. How would you approach a modular course to give yourself the best chance? Asking you as a modular proponent.
Well, you're absolutely right that you shouldn't just buy on price. There are some fairly average modular schools out there, but by the same token, there are some fairly average integrated schools out there. And you should always buy on quality and value for money. The answer to that is feedback. You need to go to the school, you need to talk to the students, and there is a whole industry of people out there that have been to all these various schools and will happily engage with you on Facebook and Twitter and discuss the merits of each particular path. So certainly don't buy on money, but money is an important part of it, because when you look at the training costs, you get the equivalent license for, well, roughly half the price by taking a modular route, and that just strikes me as blindingly obvious common sense. And I think it's significant that the integrated schools, which wouldn't have touted modular at all 9 months ago, are now going, yes, well, we have very good modular programs, and I'm sure they do have very good modular programs. But in every place, look for the feedback, buy on quality, and ultimately, though, it is going to come down to you. Your personal qualities are the things that are going to get you through an interview. Yes, you can fly an approach, but you need to be the right person for the job.
Okay, thank you very much. We've got 3 more to go, 3 more minutes of wisdom. Eugene.
Yeah, I would look look to the long term, think long term. Don't look at the short term sort of gloom of the current situation. I agree with Andy and William, I think it was, who spoke about now more than ever it's important to look for quality training and a high standard, whether that be through modular or integrated. Absolutely, and there are different opportunities in both of those. But the point I really want to make is that you have that dream of being a pilot. Look to the future and go after that dream because it's worth it.
Thank you. Oscar?
We've been hearing from different people that what it is really crucial right now is for the people who are considering to start training is to protect their investment, actually. There's no doubt that there's difficult days and difficult times for all of us, and there will be organizations which will suffer more than others. And you will remember of ATOs that some years ago in the good days, they collapsed, and many people actually had to interrupt the training and they lost some money. So imagine now how careful people have to be in regards to protecting their investment. And you have also to consider the flexibility of the training organizations to adapt to the current environment. There's no doubt that COVID is going to be with us for a few more months, maybe for a year. And if you start your training now, how well prepared the ATO is to actually deal with COVID, to minimize the potential delays of the training and the buggering around, what cost can be added just because of those delays and the confinement that you may have. So it's something to consider. And as Alex was mentioning before, ask to students who have gone through recently in the first wave how their ATOs reacted, and make sure that actually you're prepared.
Thank you very much, Oscar. And as a panellist here who's not linked to any ATO at all, or doesn't run an ATO, I should say, Petter, can I ask you to leave us with your minute of wisdom?
Absolutely, I love to leave with minutes of wisdom. So first of all, I'm very happy to hear all of the different opinions from all of the panelists here today. What we haven't talked about, we've talked a lot about the positives, the benefits of going integrated or modular, but what we haven't talked about is the quality of the person itself. That is going to be the most crucial part of you being successful in your training. Sure, finding the right ATO is really important, but you being suitable to becoming an airline pilot, it's by far the most important thing. Now, we've talked about Andy O'Shea. I am working together with Andy O'Shea. We started the Airline Pilot Club this week. We've actually launched it, and one of the key features we have is that before people go into any type of training, they can go in and they can do an indicative assessment to show what kind of prerequisites they have for these pilot competencies that Andy has been talking about. And if they do that indicative assessment, they will also get feedback saying, all right, these are things that you should be working on before you start your training, even, before you even start thinking about your training in order to be successful. And then after that, we are aspiring to try to find the best ATOs out there. Andy has extensive knowledge and experience in checking flight schools from his previous role. So that's what we're doing. So at the moment, we are trying to find the right people to do the training. We're then trying to help them and guide them towards ATOs that we think have the qualities that Oscar was just talking about, the qualities both financial and training wise to bridge the current pandemic and the situation that we're in. So making sure that you have the qualities to become a pilot is the most important. The second most important is to go in for the right type of training, be it modular or integrated. That's going to be something that's decided by largely your wallet, but make sure that you know what you're getting yourself into, and make sure that you have plans.
Thank you very much for that.
Just run out of time, just got overtime, so I'd like to thank our first panel, William, Andy, Petter, Oscar, Eugene, Alex. Apologies for the technical issues we had earlier on. Got our teething troubles out of the way. The next session, there's been quite a lot of questions about Brexit and transition, and the next session is with Glenn Bradley from the CA, who'll be telling us everything he knows about Brexit. I just don't know how much he knows about Brexit. So we'll move to that. So thank you very much, everyone, and I'll see most of you at some other time on another panel. Thank you.